At first glance, this 1901 studio photo appears harmless until you notice the figure behind the curtain seems like any ordinary family portrait. A father, mother, and two children sit quietly, captured in a moment meant to preserve calm and dignity. Charles Whitman, the father, sits upright, his fingers lightly clasped, eyes forward but distant, as if carrying the weight of unspoken responsibilities. Beside him, Lillian Whitman, his wife, maintains gentle composure, hands folded neatly on her skirt. Their children, a girl and a boy, sit symmetrically, expressions a careful mix of curiosity and solemnity, reflecting the seriousness expected in a formal photograph. Yet behind the velvet curtain, draping the corner of the studio, a faint, almost ghost-like face peers through. Edith Lawson, the Whitmans' shy cousin, whose fragile health had kept her largely secluded. Her accidental presence would, decades later, become the key to uncovering secrets hidden in plain sight. The photograph on its surface seems simple, yet every detail hints at careful orchestration. Charles Whitman, a reserved man in his mid-30s, was keenly aware of propriety and reputation. A clerk by profession, he understood the nuances of social hierarchies and the fragility of public perception. Financial setbacks and local rumors had recently threatened the family's standing, leaving Charles preoccupied with shielding them from scrutiny. Internally, he wrestled with balancing honesty and protection. Lillian, the stabilizing presence in the household, quietly guided her children while managing social appearances. She possessed a keen awareness of local gossip and family secrets, maintaining calm while holding the threads of the household together. Together, the Whitmans projected an ideal of domestic composure, even as tension and fear simmered beneath the surface. The children, barely 10 and 7, mirrored their parents' caution. They represented the visible stability of the family, yet depended entirely on the careful orchestration of their parents' behavior. Edith, hidden behind the curtain, was almost invisible in the image. Shy and fragile, she had been largely kept apart from daily life due to her health. Her accidental inclusion in the photograph, unnoticed at the time, would later provide critical clues for historians and investigators seeking to understand the family's hidden dynamics. The photograph was taken in Rochester, New York, during a period when the city thrived industrially, yet social stratification dictated the way families conducted themselves publicly. Studio photographs were expensive and meticulously staged, intended to convey respectability and stability. Charles had chosen this particular studio for its reputation, trusting the photographer, Harold Pembroke, to capture the family with composure and dignity. Pembroke was known for balancing seriousness with subtle warmth in his portraits, but when he noticed the curtain and the faint shadow of Edith, he said nothing, professional discretion overriding curiosity. What seemed incidental at the time would become, in the decades ahead, central to understanding the story hidden within the photograph. Every element of the composition carries meaning once carefully examined. Charles's posture, rigid yet controlled, hints at the pressure he felt to protect the family's reputation. Lillian's calm demeanor masks constant vigilance, ensuring that both children and household were managed with quiet authority. The children's expressions, a blend of solemnity and unease, reflect the weight of adult expectations they were too young to fully grasp. Edith's hidden presence, barely discernible, signals how families often prioritized social propriety and protection over openness. Even the photographer, neutral and professional, contributed unknowingly to the preservation of these subtle details, leaving future observers a chance to unravel the story decades later. The Whitmans' lives were framed by the social expectations of the time. Victorian-era mores demanded respectability and careful avoidance of scandal. Charles and Lillian, having recently endured financial strain, were acutely aware of the dangers posed by rumors, whether of business misfortune, mental instability, or impropriety. Charles's professional knowledge allowed him to navigate local bureaucracy quietly, shielding the family from consequences they could not afford. Lillian's domestic intelligence and social awareness complemented this effort, maintaining both harmony and appearances. Edith, meanwhile, lived quietly under a relative's care, largely hidden from social scrutiny. Her appearance behind the curtain was accidental, yet it captured the intersection of family duty, secrecy, and the fragility of reputation. Modern analysis, made possible by historical cross-referencing and digital enhancement, revealed subtleties long overlooked. The angle of lighting, shadowing, slight head tilts, and Edith's barely visible eyes all spoke to intentional staging and inadvertent disclosure. Letters from Lillian to distant relatives, diaries maintained by neighbors, and city directories later confirmed the identity of the hidden figure and the family's intentions. The photograph, once considered trivial, became evidence of careful decision-making, protection, and ethical balancing. It illustrated not only the Whitmans' attempt to manage their social standing, but also the broader challenges families faced in maintaining dignity amidst social scrutiny. The photograph also reflects the ethical and emotional pressures that governed daily life. Charles's precise attention to posture, clothing, and expression indicates his acute concern for propriety and reputation. Lillian's subtle influence ensured composure in a family under stress, masking tensions while guiding the children. Edith's hidden presence, though accidental, illuminates how fragile and contingent family life could be, how one member's vulnerability could shape the behavior of the entire household. Even the photographer's neutrality contributed to the preservation of these human truths, leaving a visual record of social caution and family loyalty. Examining the photograph reveals an intricate narrative of ethical decisions, fear, and loyalty. What appears simple on the surface contains decades of anxiety, protective behavior, and quiet moral negotiation. Modern forensic historians traced Edith behind the curtain to corroborating documentation, revealing her status as a cousin largely removed from daily life due to health. Letters and city records demonstrated that the Whitmans acted out of both fear of scandal and a genuine desire to protect her. In this light, the photograph is transformed from a simple family memento into a rich historical artifact, capturing not only appearances, but the hidden moral and emotional frameworks of the family. The narrative arc embedded in the photograph is subtle, yet emotionally compelling. It demonstrates how an ordinary image can encode layers of anxiety, protection, and loyalty. Digital enhancement and archival research eventually revealed Edith, connecting her to documents and anecdotes previously ignored. This revelation reshaped understanding of the family, proving that even a static, posed image can conceal a complex story of ethics, morality, and human behavior. The Whitmans' careful orchestration and the accidental inclusion of a hidden figure illustrate both the fragility and resilience of family life in early 20th century America. The photograph invites reflection on human perception and the consequences of overlooked details. What had been invisible for nearly a century became clear through careful attention, patience, and historical curiosity. It is a testament to observation, human subtlety, and the impact of social expectations on everyday life. Through the interplay of family duty, societal pressure, and hidden presence, the image provides insight not only into the Whitmans' lives, but also into the era itself, its ethics, fears, and priorities. The photograph captures a moment in which a single frame preserves the quiet complexity of human relationships, the protective instincts of parents, and the delicate moral decisions imposed by social norms. The photograph, once taken for simple remembrance, would later draw the attention of historians and forensic analysts, who were intrigued not only by the composition of the Whitman family, but by the subtle, hidden figure behind the curtain. Rochester, in 1901, was a city of quiet order and industrious growth, yet social reputation carried immense weight. Families like the Whitmans navigated a world where even minor missteps could be remembered, repeated, and judged harshly. It is within this context that the photograph becomes a window into family strategy, ethics, and secrecy. Charles Whitman's cautious demeanor in the photograph was no accident. Beyond his role as a father and husband, he was a clerk who understood bureaucracy, social expectation, and the fragile nature of public standing. A minor scandal involving forged documents and a local business dispute had recently threatened the family's reputation. Though no charges had stuck, whispers had circulated among neighbors, creating a quiet but persistent social tension. His upright posture, distant gaze, and precise positioning of the children in the photograph reflected his meticulous attention to appearances, his way of shielding the family from gossip. Lillian, equally aware of the pressures surrounding them, had ensured that the household remained outwardly composed, her own subtle influence shaping the children's behavior and the overall impression captured in the studio. The children, though young, were shaped by this environment. Their solemn expressions hint at the understanding, at least instinctively, that they were under scrutiny, not only by the photographer, but by the broader world of neighbors, friends, and relatives. Edith Lawson, the cousin hidden behind the curtain, had been largely kept apart from everyday family life. Fragile and shy, she had little social presence outside the Whitman home, yet her accidental inclusion would, decades later, unlock a hidden narrative. Her presence behind the curtain was, in essence, a record of both protection and concealment, a photographic trace of the quiet moral decisions the family had made. For decades, the figure behind the curtain remained unnoticed, its significance unrecognized. Letters, diaries, and city directories would later reveal Edith's placement in the Whitman household was carefully managed. She had been sent to live with a relative after a family tragedy, a decision motivated by both concern for her health and the desire to maintain family discretion. Yet the photograph captures her, faintly, inadvertently, revealing that even in seclusion she remained part of the family's narrative. It is this unintentional evidence that makes the photograph remarkable to modern eyes, offering insight into both individual character and broader Victorian-era social expectations. Harold Pembroke, the studio photographer, was meticulous and professional. He framed the family with precision, ensuring light fell evenly, shadows softened, and the composition maintained balance. When he noticed the faint figure behind the curtain, he made no note of it. It would not have been appropriate for him to comment or alter the scene. The photograph, therefore, serves as both an intentional recording of family order and an accidental preservation of hidden truth. It is this duality, the planned and the inadvertent, that gives the image its enduring intrigue. Historical research reveals that the Whitman household was shaped by a series of delicate pressures. Financial instability, local gossip, and the weight of social propriety forced Charles and Lillian into careful management of every public appearance. Letters between Lillian and distant relatives suggest that the family was intensely aware of how they were perceived, and their decisions often balanced dignity, safety, and moral responsibility. Edith's seclusion, the careful positioning of the children, and the father's formal posture in the photograph were all part of a broader strategy to maintain respectability, yet they inadvertently left traces for future investigators. Modern forensic analysts, using high-resolution scanning and light mapping, detected the faint outline of Edith's face behind the curtain. Shadows, tilts of her head, and the slight visibility of her eyes suggested presence without intention. Cross-referencing city directories and archival letters confirmed her identity. Historians discovered that the hidden cousin had lived quietly in a nearby home, cared for by a relative after the death of her parents. She had been largely invisible to society, her health and fragility necessitating seclusion. The photograph, therefore, becomes a layered document, a representation of the family's public face, a record of social morality, and a trace of private decision-making. Further exploration of local records illuminates the context in which the photograph was taken. Rochester families in this era were heavily influenced by social networks, religious communities, and local business circles. Reputation mattered deeply. A whispered scandal could follow a family for years. Within this framework, the Whitmans' meticulous orchestration of the photograph makes sense. Every detail, from the alignment of hands to the expression on the father's face, was a small bulwark against gossip and social censure. Yet in attempting to preserve dignity, they inadvertently created a clue for the future, a subtle trace of their decision-making and the hidden lives of family members like Edith. Letters discovered decades later show Lillian's concern for Edith. She wrote about her cousin's health, her isolation, and the challenges of integrating her into family life without drawing attention. These documents reveal both care and anxiety. Edith was protected, yet hidden, and the photograph became an unintentional record of that protective strategy. Charles, too, had participated in careful planning, balancing his sense of moral responsibility with the practical need to maintain social standing. Together, husband and wife acted to preserve both family honor and individual welfare, using subtlety rather than confrontation. The photograph also reveals something deeper about Victorian-era moral psychology. Families like the Whitmans often made choices guided by fear, loyalty, and the desire to protect. These decisions could leave traces that were invisible to contemporaries, but readable to modern historians. The hidden figure behind the curtain is not evidence of wrongdoing, but a record of care, caution, and social constraint. In this way, the image becomes a moral artifact, revealing the tension between public perception and private responsibility. The story grows more compelling when considered alongside the broader historical context. Rochester, though industrially prosperous, was socially constrained. Families of modest means, like the Whitmans, had to navigate these pressures carefully. Financial setbacks, rumors, and personal tragedy all created conditions that demanded discretion. The photograph reflects not just a family moment, but a strategy, a deliberate construction of image and reputation. Yet it also reveals the human error of leaving something hidden in plain sight. Edith's faint presence, almost invisible, would eventually become the focal point for those seeking the truth. By tracing the connections between the photograph, archival records, and modern forensic analysis, historians reconstructed a narrative that had been obscured for nearly a century. Edith's accidental inclusion, once overlooked, became a lens through which to understand family dynamics, social pressures, and moral decision-making. Letters, diaries, and public records combined to explain why she had been hidden, how the family had acted to protect her, and what this revealed about the interplay of health, morality, and reputation in early 20th century Rochester. The photograph, therefore, is no longer simply a portrait. It is a layered record of careful orchestration, social navigation, and moral judgment. It preserves the quiet work of parents protecting a vulnerable family member, balancing public perception with private duty. Charles's cautious intelligence, Lillian's subtle control, Edith's accidental visibility, and Harold Pembroke's professional neutrality all converge to create an image rich in ethical and historical meaning. For modern viewers, it becomes both a mystery and a revelation, inviting reflection on human behavior, social expectation, and the enduring power of observation. Modern analysis finally brought clarity to the photograph that had intrigued historians for decades. Using high-resolution scans, light mapping, and archival cross-referencing, experts confirmed the faint figure behind the curtain was Edith Lawson, the Whitmans' hidden cousin. She had been living quietly with a relative after a family tragedy, largely removed from daily life due to fragile health. The Whitmans, motivated by both care and social prudence, had intentionally shielded her from public view. Charles's precise positioning of the children, Lillian's careful composure, and the father's solemn gaze were all conscious choices to preserve family dignity, yet they unintentionally left a subtle clue for future investigators. Letters, diaries, and city directories reinforced the photographic evidence. Lillian's correspondence described her concern for Edith's health, her attempts to integrate her into family life while avoiding social scrutiny, and the quiet fear of scandal that shaped every decision. Charles' own actions reflected a similar balance of moral responsibility and protection, showing how families navigated ethical and social pressures in an era when reputation could be fragile and unforgiving. The photograph, once considered ordinary, became a document of ethical complexity, capturing the intersection of care, secrecy, and public perception. What the photograph ultimately revealed was not malice, deception, or wrongdoing, but a family's careful management of vulnerability and reputation. Edith's accidental inclusion behind the curtain became a focal point for understanding the Whitmans' choices, their protective instincts, their ethical deliberations, and the small human errors that leave traces for later generations. The studio image, frozen in time, preserved subtle gestures, glances, and shadows that spoke volumes about human behavior, social expectation, and familial loyalty. The story closes with a quiet reflection on the significance of observation and historical inquiry. What seemed a minor detail, a hidden face in a photograph, unfolded into a rich narrative of responsibility, care, and moral consideration. It reminds us that history often whispers in the smallest details, waiting for patience, curiosity, and careful scrutiny to uncover its truths. The Whitman photograph stands as a testament to the ways families protect one another, how ethical choices shape daily life, and how even hidden truths can emerge with time and attention. In the end, the image teaches a subtle but powerful lesson. What is hidden is not always sinister, and what appears ordinary can contain extraordinary human insight. For the Whitmans and Edith Lawson, dignity was preserved, secrets were kept for protection rather than harm, and history, when observed with care, rewards those willing to notice the quiet truths. The curtain may have concealed Edith in 1901, but over a century later, it has revealed a story of loyalty, ethical judgment, and the delicate balance between public image and private care, a story that invites reflection, understanding, and appreciation for the hidden complexities of human life. If this story has sparked your interest in the hidden truths of history, consider subscribing to our channel to help keep these stories alive. We'd also love to hear from you. Share in the comments which city you're watching from and your local time. It's fascinating to see how far these documented histories travel.